Well, we'll start. I guess we're right at noon right now, so I'll start us off because we do have a lot to talk about, and we have some great panelists. I'd like to thank you all for coming today. I'm Chasten Remillard. I'm the program head for the Masters in Professional Communications and also the BA in Professional Communications here at Royal Roads University. So I'd like to welcome you all to this session. As you may or may not know, Royal Roads is on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples in the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And it's, of course, with great gratitude that we live, work, and learn here, where the past, present, and future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff come together. One of the things that we do at Royal Roads is that we offer folks an opportunity to have a little bit of an information session about our programs, and we have a couple of those information sessions coming up. They're for both the MA and the BA programs, and my colleague Ariana from recruitment is going to put that information in the chat for you with the links. If you're interested, please take the time to register for one of those events, and someone will get in touch with you and give some information to you about that. So today, we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and ethical communication practices. We've lined up a great panel for you. A lot of the work organizing this was done by Peter Ryan. Peter is a visiting scholar here at Royal Roads, and he's also been with the Department of Public Relations at Mount Royal University since 2026. Since 2021, Peter has been teaching government public relations, issues management, risk, crisis communications, and in the winter of 2022, he's created a new course called the Canadian Energy Industry Corporate Responsibility, Social Responsibility. He's also an accredited in public relations and APR through the Canadian Public Relations Society and is currently on the executive board of CPRS Calgary. So thanks, Peter, for bringing together the panel today. Joining Peter is Rebecca Baltzma, who is an international AI trainer, presenter, and enthusiast, renowned for her expertise in educating thousands of professionals about the fundamentals of and risks of artificial intelligence. Her work focuses on enhancing generative AI literacy and advocating for the ethical and responsible adoption of AI technologies. With over 15 years of experience in strategic communications and public relations, Rebecca holds an APR as well from the CPRS and a degree from Royal Roads University. She's an executive board member of the Canadian Association of Communications and Education, and she serves as the Director of Communications for Public School District in Alberta. Also joining us is Archie McLean. Archie McLean is an assistant professor of journalism at Mount Royal University, where he teaches multimedia reporting and is a faculty advisor for the Calgary Journal. Before coming to Calgary, Archie was the managing editor for CBC North in Yellowknife. There, he led a team of journalists covering 3 territories and 1 province. During his tenure, his team was nominated for a Missioner Award and the Canadian Journalism Foundation Digital Innovation Award. He holds a Master's of Science in Journalism from Columbia University in New York and a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Environmental Studies from the University of Victoria. Welcome, Archie. And last but not least, joining us all the way from Dubai, not where he normally lives, but where he's visiting and consulting, is Alex Sevigny. Alex is a director of the Master of Communications and Management program housed in the Department of Communication Studies and Multimedia, offered in partnership between McMaster and Syracuse universities. Alex does research in social media, data science, and how it intersects with public relations, political communication. He also is the editor of the Journal of Professional Communication. So welcome our panelists, and thank you all for coming today. I will turn it over to Peter, who will be the managing the questions and the discussion today. And thanks again for joining us all here at Royal Roads. And if you haven't already, check out tomorrow and the next day, we have a larger conference on ethical communication that's free. And Tanya can give you or I think Ariana just gave you that information, or Tanya can in the chat. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you to our generous hosts at Royal Roads University. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you, but in chat, a big believer of giving people takeaway information. So you'll see, I'm going to paste in the chat if it will bring it up for a second. Just bear with me. Here is our slides, because we won't get through all of them today. There's lots of takeaways, but I just wanted to share those with everyone and let you know the basic framework of our talk today. So the next slide has the key questions that are going to guide our discussion, and it's meant to be an open discussion with the panelists. For a quick description of what we're talking about, I want to situate it within professional communication organizations such as the Canadian Public Relations Society and the International Association of Business Communication. Those kind of organizations are emphasizing gaining AI skills for the job market today as a requirement for future practitioners. But another situating factor is how we need safeguards in this use, and how, as ethical communicators, we need to be aware of those, sharing in a community practice, just like we're emulating on this panel. Because every 6 months, folks like Amber McCarthy, the savvy Canadian tech specialist, says that's what we're going to have to deal with, just like we did with updates like Wikipedia and social media, those disruptive technologies. We need to communicate about the practice and the best practices that we're learning from one another. So we know now that the governments in Canada, the European Union, and the United States all have AI regulations in place which emphasize industry voluntarily using codes of conduct and governments having the ability to step in to regulate problematic AI cases across industries. So in that context, I want to get to our discussion fairly quickly. And we're going to start with an overall segue by not going into these 4 questions right away. I'm going to go to our panelists in order of alphabetical first name to situate where they, if they can each describe what they see as the AI landscape from their own vantage points, to help situate their own expertise and how you view AI use right now. So we'll start with a broad overview, because we know our audience probably includes students, practitioners, and people from across the industry. So we want to let you know about us, and then we'll go through these questions. So I'll turn things over to Archie McLean to start saying, help us with your vantage point.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you so much for bringing this panel together today. I'm really excited about it. So maybe I'll, if everyone can see me here, I'll just explain. My career started about 20 years ago now, and it feels like forever ago, because I got my very first cell phone to actually go to journalism school so I could be a reporter and do this kind of work. And in that time, it feels like there have been this marked fundamental change throughout my career. Every step of the way, there has been major technological change that has changed the way that journalists do their work. And I think, we've sort of made it through the social media era. I think that was probably the last major disruption in terms of how journalists did and distributed their work. But I think AI will be bigger than that. And I think in time, it will transform all of our information lives. Journalists have already started using AI in some kind of mundane ways, like spell checkers, obviously, but things also like transcription software and translation software, that kind of thing. And larger newsrooms are starting to use AI in more ambitious ways all the time, which is exciting for people who follow technology, follow media, follow journalism. It's always exciting when there are new tools and new ways of doing our work. But I have this larger worry that all of this has the ability or the possibility that it could undermine all of our fact-based understanding of the world. And this goes beyond journalism, but all of our kind of fact-based understanding of things. It's already being eroded on a number of fronts. And it feels like AI, which is so authoritative, feels so authoritative, but is not a fact machine. It's a language machine. I have this bad feeling that it can undermine what's already feels tenuous, this idea that our debate should be informed by facts and a common understanding of facts. So there's this spirit of cautious experimentation that I'm trying to model in my classes, where we're using a ChatGPT and where we're using AI to experiment, to do new things, but to also understand the ethical use and how we might do that as best we can. So cautious experimentation is how I feel about the work we're doing in my classes, and I'm just really looking forward to this discussion today.
Thank you, Archie. Next up, we have Alex. What's your vantage point?
Yeah, thank you. I've been involved in computation and quantification of communication research since I started studying, and I'm a rare quantitative researcher. And in fact, my PhD was sort of AI adjacent because it was in linguistics and computation. And then I parlayed that into a career as a data-driven strategist in communications management and university professor at McMaster University. We've always tried to be a little bit ahead of the curve, particularly in our comms management master's program, which is it's an executive education program. So we work with managers and directors from all over the place. So I've had this interesting vantage point where I've had an opportunity to hear leaders in comms who are mid-career or more senior dealing with technology as it has hit us in waves. And the first one was social media, as we all remember, and that washed over our economy and our culture like a giant wave. And I think I might be a little provocative in saying this, but I sometimes think that our profession maybe missed the boat on social media, maybe didn't wrap our arms around it as much as we should have, strategically and also as a tactic and also as a fundamental part of the practice. Maybe it was too late. And so the public interest wasn't maybe protected as much as it would have been in what used to be this sort of uneasy pact between communicators and journalists in the mainstream media. And now we have artificial intelligence, which I agree with Archie is a transformative technology. It's the first technology that's actually a storytelling technology. And it's the first technology that's actually an active relational technology, where the technology itself builds relationships, or could do, which social media just facilitated relationships. So for me, AI, a good place to start thinking of is AI on steroids. Sorry, AI is like social media on steroid. In terms of what we're doing at Mac, we've been at least I've been very encouraging of the students to experiment and to document how they use it. And so my students have been using it a lot. I knew they were using it anyways. So, I tried to make them bring that out into the open. So that's where we're at. And I really think we face an incredible opportunity in AI as a profession.
Thank you, Alex. Rebecca, what's
Hi,
your vantage
everyone.
point?
Thank you, Peter. I think my vantage point is a little bit different because I feel like I'm right in the trenches. My whole fascination is how to use all these new AI tools and find practical applications for them in my everyday life and in my professional life. And I work in K-12 education. So I'm looking at it from a K-12 education standpoint, how we can use this in schools and in district communication and school public relations, but also how can I use this to make my life easier or better or more organized, because I'm kind of a productivity junkie / communication language junkie. So my vantage point is a little bit more from what works for this for normal people in everyday life, because I think that's where people get stuck. I think first people need to kind of get their heads around how these work, but then how can I use these in a way that makes sense for me? I spent the last year doing my APR and doing a bunch of courses, and I really tried to use it as a student and use it as a learning tool and use it to help keep myself organized and interact with it in a lot of different ways. And so I think really the secret right now to the landscape is figuring out how it works, figuring out where it can help you and where it might be better that you just do it on your own with your human brain, and then navigating all the ethical landmines along the way. So that's kind of my vantage point.
Thank you, Rebecca. And for myself, before we go to the first question, Mount Royal University in Calgary, where I'm an associate professor, currently also a visiting scholar at Royal Roads because I'm on sabbatical. Academic freedom for instructors is the main guiding principle I've seen used in the classroom at Mount Royal. In contrast, at Royal Roads, I've seen the entire professional communications program come together and create guiding documents that are actually shared with credit in the slides that we shared in the chat earlier. So anyone that needs some guidelines as an instructor, those are there as a model, but also as part of the conversation, along with the rubric. If you're trying to invigorate the use, but also make it ethical. So those are some key takeaways from my vantage point, but also professionally via consulting and also as the current CPRS Calgary president and working on the advisory board at the Center for Crisis and Risk Communication. So I find professionally, we're focused on translating the ethical guidelines, like in the short version of don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat, don't misrepresent yourself or others. How are those being enforced or impacted with AI use? So we're really trying to translate those through kind of checklists and editorial practices that we had to do for social media. What kind of biases are encoded when into AI that you're using that you should check before a communication goes out? Is credit given? Those sorts of things. So that's my vantage point. And it goes all the way back to my undergrad at the U of A in the 90s, where I started looking at computers and AI alongside tracking texts online. So been interested, like Alex, from a quantitative perspective for quite some time. So our first question now is, what key AI skills are needed in professional communication courses to support students entering the workforce? And maybe we'll go in reverse first name alphabetical order, going back to Rebecca to start off the conversation.
All right, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I think there's two things. I think number one is that basic AI literacy. What is it? How does it work? And how do we use it ethically and responsibly? Like you mentioned, Peter, what does that ethics look like within this context? But I think kind of the second critical skill might not be an AI skill at all. I really think it might be a doubling down on those human-centric soft skills. I was reading something this morning that talked about how communication is still the #1 in demand skill on LinkedIn right now. It was an article in the New York Times I read this morning, and back during World War II, military analysts were trying to figure out how to make the planes stronger. And so as planes were coming back damaged, they look at where the bullet holes were and decided to make those areas stronger. And then a guy named Abraham Wald kind of said, no, we need to look at where the bullets didn't hit, because that must be where the other planes were hit and they never came back. So we need to reinforce these areas. And I really think we need to look at reinforcing those soft skills, those human-centric areas, and making them even stronger. So verbal communication skills, developing empathy, critical thinking, interpersonal relationships, negotiation, leadership, a lot of those communication skills that are soft. I think that we need to double down on those more than ever, because I think they've been around for a long time. They've allowed us as humans to collaborate and innovate and adapt. And I think they're going to be the most durable skills for communicators. I think we can adapt to some of the technical things as long as we understand the basics. But I think really we need to keep doing a lot of what we're doing, which is doubling down on those really soft skills.
I guess we'll go to Alex now. As again, the question, what key AI skills are needed in professional communication courses to support students entering the workforce?
Yeah, I actually really agree with Rebecca. Her points are line and really well taken. So I'll add on that I think skills in how to interact with AIs in effective ways. I think just like everyone thinks they're an expert at social media, but aren't actually that strategic about it. I think a lot of folks who are AI users think that they're, super clever at how they use it, and actually they could do a lot better. They could be a lot more productive and use it a lot more effectively. So teaching students to think like that's kind of what I've been trying to do, which kind of leads them to become prompt engineers, if you will. Because if people in the workforce are going to turn to the juniors of today to explain the technology of tomorrow, it always happens, right? And so they need a structured, confident language that they can use to explain and be confident using it and capable, but also to confident about it to their boss or to their coworkers. Then they kind of become the expert or the change maker in that, which is often the role assigned to juniors. So I would say really teaching them mastery of the tools and how to think like a coder to engineer.
Thank you, Alex. Archie.
Yeah, I can just build on what's been previously said here, which is that foundation of skills really is helpful. When I'm talking about using ChatGPT and using AI, it tends to be in these senior level courses where students already have an understanding of basics of writing and constructing their own arguments and thinking for themselves. So this tends to be at senior levels where they're playing with these tools a little more. I think that understanding of what AI is and isn't is a critical thing. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there as to what these models are. And, it's interesting, if you spit things in, I often just urge students to play around with ChatGPT and play around with these tools if they haven't, because they really are quite mind-blowing. And it takes a while. I think a lot of people are underwhelmed at first until they start going a little deeper and understanding what they can do. And these tools spit back to you information that's so authoritative. It sounds so true. It sounds so real. It sounds like there's another person on the other end who's an authority on something, when it's not. It's just an elaborate mimic of sorts. And so, having students first understand, they think that because the machine spit it back out at them, it must be true. And it's such an elegant tool that it can fool you into doing that. So that AI literacy is just really like at the front of a lot of this. And I think at the front of what we should be teaching when it comes to these skills. And that goes hand in hand with a lot of the ethical concerns around it. Where does the tool get its information from? Who's training it? What sort of biases are inherent in this thing? That sort of stuff, along with, of course, the more practical skills like how do I, interact with it and build prompts. But those ethical concerns and the understanding of what it is and is not, I think, should be really important in any sort of course and instruction on this stuff.
Thanks, Archie. To give my 2 cents before we get to the next question, sorry. Definitely believe in creating those checklists of practices, being involved in a community of practice, but to amplify a different kind of message, some people have asked, well, especially students or practitioners that I've been in discussions with, how is AI similar or different from the disruption of, say, Wikipedia or essay mills in the classroom or at work? So similar to Wikipedia, I guess It's how and when students or employees can use AI, should they even be using it, how to credit AI in the creation of your content if you choose to use it, and how to avoid the worst abuses of AI, that AI literacy that Archie was talking about, a form of media literacy. Those are similar to Wikipedia. But what's different is how it can be used as a tool of discovery. Like social media content creation is also a really valuable tool in it for doing SEO, right, in the coding. Those are things that are new. And the speed of summarizing media via transcriptions, like those kind of things that Archie and the panel were discussing, like there are novel things that really speed up professional skills. And I go back to thinking through William Gibson's 2003 novel, Pattern Recognition, that describes some of the unintended consequences of AI, like faulty pattern recognition being almost like a hallucination, leading humans to live in the age of apophenia, which it means the tendency to perceive connections or meaningful patterns in things that have no association, completely random things. So we become confused or put out misinformation without knowing it. So that soft skill component, so those are the things that I find different from the Wikipedia disruption. So I guess that leads to the next question. And the question is, how are educational institutions talking about ways to avoid plagiarism in student assignments and rubrics, building skills for their future careers? Should I just keep going back and forth through the alphabetical order? I guess we would go back to Archie to answer that question.
Thanks, Peter. I could probably use an example from two classes that I'm teaching this term that might be illustrative. The first one is a junior level, a first year level communications class, communications history, and it's all online. The readings are online. There's actually no synchronous lectures at all. And the students do weekly reflections, they do discussion posts, and they do essays. And in that class, they're not allowed to use ChatGPT. They're supposed to be doing these reflections on their own. They're supposed to be doing this writing on their own. It's a difficult one to police because I'm not meeting with these students regularly. So the learning outcomes of the class don't mesh with the use of ChatGPT. And so in this class, they're told they're not allowed to use it. And I don't think it's an appropriate kind of class. And we've designed the assignments in a way that we've tried to make it so that ChatGPT would have a difficult time with them. Things like finding resources and finding references, and in some cases summarizing them in ways that the AI would have a difficult time with. And so on that early early year class, we don't use it. Contrast that to a senior year digital media class that I teach with my journalism students. And in that class, I'm actually kind of interested in how they might use ChatGPT in their work. So I say, go ahead and use it for your work. However, with a big red flag of transparency. I would like to know how they're using it in every instance that they use it. Are you using it for research? Are you using it to generate ideas? Are you using it for transcription? Are you generating things with it, like headlines or potential headlines? And in that case, I'm actually quite curious. I'd like to know how they're doing it. But the transparency piece is a big one. They must inform me anytime they use it. And I would say they've done that to this point, although I guess I don't have anything built into it. But again, senior level students, they're going to have to be making these decisions, these sort of ethical decisions on their own anyway. So it's a different framework than it would be in one of those junior classes.
Over to Alex.
Sorry, just had to unmute for a second there. I think that the key element here is strategic thinking. I think that the way people, I'm just building on my last point about using technology effectively. And quite often people are very tactical and responsive and not strategic in the way they use it and not structured. And so going through traditional ways of thinking through decision trees, thinking through workflows, thinking about where AI can fit into a workflow, even as a student, right? Rather than thinking AI is the solution to the problem. Right? A lot of my students right now. And actually, I've heard this, to be honest with you, I've heard this from practitioners who aren't students, who are using it in their professional lives, which is, oh, that is the solution. I can do what I need to do in 5 minutes, and it's great. You're not actually doing what you need to do in 5 minutes if that's how you're using, ChatGPT or Copilot. Rather, you should really be thinking about where AI can be deployed in your workflow to enhance your productivity, to build your relationships, to scale your relationships, to add gloss and a finishing touch to your work, enhance your writing, enhance your visuals, storyboard your stories, ideate, right? But these are not random activities. Like if you were to talk to a human being and say, hey, let's ideate, you don't just kind of grab them, turn them on, throw them down in front of you on a chair and say, hey, we're ideating now, right? You have a plan, and you have an approach, and you have a structure, and you explain what you're working on to them. So that would be my thought, is thinking strategically and thinking about workflow. And I'll add a recommended sci-fi novel, The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. It's all about having a chatbot assistant that is there to help you in many different ways. Great novel.
Thanks, Alex. Rebecca.
So my approach is a little bit different. I actually do just throw everything at an AI system and see what works and what doesn't all the time. I have probably 5 or 6 different AI models I switch back and forth between and experiment with them as thought partners and brainstorm partners and all these different ways. And then I see what works, and then I kind of go back to them for specific things. I think it's interesting. Ethan Mollick, who is someone who's amazing in the AI space. If you don't follow him on LinkedIn or X, I highly recommend. He talks a little bit about how we've used historically words as a proxy for a ton of different things. So the number of words you write is an indicator of your effort. The quality of the words you write is an indicator of your intelligence. How error-free your words are demonstrates how much you care about your work. And I don't know that that's going to work anymore. Keep in mind, I'm not an educator like my fellow panelists, so my view is a little bit different, but there's one thing I feel very strongly about, just based on all the reading I've done, and that is that I really don't think we should be using AI detectors. They don't work. Ethan Mollick also talks about how they're basically the equivalent of parents telling kids that if you pee in the pool, it's going to turn blue and everybody's going to know. It's this myth, and eventually people realize it doesn't work. OpenAI, the company that is behind ChatGPT, tried building an AI detector, and they shut it down, saying we can't even detect our own AI in this work. It's got a really low rate of accuracy. Bringing it back to ethical issues, it unfairly targets people who don't speak English as a first language, or people who are really high performers. And so it's really difficult to use it ethically, in my opinion, and based on the research that I've been doing in it. What the solution is, I think Alex talked about, and that's from an instructor standpoint, redesigning assignments and assessments in a way, kind of like Archie talked about, that require different ways of thinking, keeping in mind that students need to be prepared for the world they're entering and not necessarily the world we grew up in, where they might be like me and just using AI for everything collaboratively here and there all the time. And then how can we get them ready for that world and doing it in an ethical way?
Thank you, Rebecca.
Just to jump in for 1 second, Peter, that Rebecca's comment reminded me, I was on a CBC call-in show, and one of the lovely callers said, we should ban all AI for all students between K to 12 and university, period. Ban it. Nobody uses it. And it's a lovely idea, maybe, but not at all realistic. And so it's a tool. It's something we can use. It's not realistic to just say, nope, that's it, and nobody gets to use it. It's too hard to police, and it's not the future anyway.
Mm-hmm. And I guess in that kind of conversation, thinking through, well, there definitely are ways to detect it. And if you're in part of a community of practice, showing students, if it's ChatGPT, it's not providing citations or references, or if it does, they're not accurate, they're made up, those kinds of things, or knowing the limit of that tool. Is it going to have anything in the past year about Alberta politics? If you're depending what you're teaching, there are huge limits that are very evident as soon as you start scraping away at how the information in the background has been encoded. So just a bit of an administrative thing here. We've got 2 questions left, and I want to remind everyone that we will have time for questions, but please paste questions in the chat as well. And before I go to question number 3, I realize people showed up late, so I'm pasting our slides back in, because there are tools there that also help with this question that we just addressed, of how educational institutions are talking about ways to avoid AI plagiarism in student assignments, and with rubrics, building skills for their future. So there's actually a rubric there, and our Royal Roads guidelines as a reminder. So keep the questions coming, and we'll get there shortly, folks. Question number 3. How can professionals and students leverage AI skills ethically and professionally? And we've asked the panel to provide one best practice from real-world examples each for this question. So the next 2 questions are kind of this one best practice lightning round before we get to our questions from the audience. So I will go back to, was it Rebecca that just answered? Yeah, because Archie, yes. So we'll go back to Rebecca. How can professionals and students leverage AI skills ethically and professionally? One real world example, Rebecca.
To me, the most important thing right now is fact checking everything and making sure you're using AI as like a thought partner, but never as a hard and fast source of information, ever. Like, don't trust anything it says. It hallucinates, it makes things up. With that said, there's one tool that I highly recommend that I've been using all the time. I use it instead of Google now, and it's called perplexity.ai. And it's basically like a ChatGPT meets Google, and it integrates Copilot from Microsoft. So you ask a question, and it asks you a follow-up question, and then gathers sources referenced from all over the internet, and writes you a summary based on credited sources, which you still then need to go back and fact check, but it makes it a whole lot easier. So it is my new favorite tool.
Okay, over to Alex.
Yeah, I'm going to go off the beaten trail a little bit, and one of the best ways communicators can use AI ethically is to do research, actually. So program evaluation afterwards. So one thing you can do to bring more credibility and accountability into your teams and is to enhance how much you evaluate yourself and to have better tabs on what you're doing. So AI enables you to do that. Which, a tool like ChatGPT analysis is pretty accurate, or things like text summarization, and like theme identification, because it just applies, and sort of natural language processing. It's actually not bad at. And so, and doing a simple sample and testing whether it's been accurate or not validates or invalidates done, but it can really speed up your sentiment analysis, your summarization. If you want to know which words you're using most often, if you want to know how you about in the media, it'll help you summarize let's say, data set of newspaper headlines. It'll pull topics, can talk about themes that are in which your client is mentioned, or the attitudes towards your client. Now, those are kind of but rough and ready is great in the day-to-day, right? So that would be my advice. Don't overlook its power as a analytical companion.
Archie.
All right. You mentioned lightning round, so I'll try and be a little bit quick here. I think of the three ways journalists can use these tools. These are from a fellow named Jeremy Kaplan at City University, New York. He publishes a newsletter called Wonder Tools. I would highly recommend signing up for it if you are interested in these sort of issues. But he puts these things into three big buckets: automation, augmentation, and generation. And I think of them as maybe getting more complex ethically as we move along. So automation is obvious. It's automating routine tasks that journalists and communicators do all the time. And so there are lots of little tasks within our day, whether it's typing out minutes from a meeting or writing an email to colleagues that ChatGPT and other AI tools can automate and hopefully take some work off our plates, although I am skeptical of that, but in theory it could. The next one is augmentation, and Rebecca was talking about this earlier, just the idea that it can help us think and do our work a little better. So that could be brainstorming or coming up with ideas for this thing or that thing. And then the final one is probably the most ethically tricky, which is actual generation of text and images. And as we all know, ChatGPT can do that, and it can do it relatively well, but there are many, many pitfalls that we can fall into. Those are the three big buckets that I would say journalists are using it for now. And there's a lot of activity in kind of all of those areas. But I think proceed with caution is the answer on all those things when it comes to the ethical part of it.
Okay. Well, I'll go to some specific examples before we go to question 4. Like yesterday, it was announced that Air Canada must pay for a man's partial refund for his flight ticket, which the airline chatbot promised. So if you're deploying chatbots via web pages for e-commerce or those sorts of things, you need to be part of that community of practice to know what policies govern the chatbots for your organization in particular, or you need to create those policies. So thinking through that one best example for professional communicators is become involved with the technology that you need to use in each industry. So other examples would be, military navigation systems and drones often have so much AI built into them, and advanced weaponry that overlaps with the self-driving car AI navigation systems, which have caused death and injury, but fewer than humans driving, but that's because we've been driving so long. Medical diagnoses and misdiagnoses in the health sector via AI tools, helping design better systems of exploration in the energy sector as well, and in the sustainability area as well, our waterways and waste, helping us to see how we can manage those things through pattern recognition. It's all a lot of recombination of data, but it helps us think through analytical components that we just couldn't do with big data on our own. So those are like very specific examples, like get engaged with the AI that are part of your industry and sector to know how it could impact your own analysis. But you still need those critical skills to be able to engage with that tool. So here's our last question for the panelists before we open it up. Overall, what are the benefits and ethical limits we should be aware of when it comes to AI in professional communication and its education? One best example each. And I think I'm going back to you, Archie.
I think it's me, although I think I have an example of bad use of AI rather than a good one. But I'll just explain a couple areas, kind of some big ethical concerns that I have my eye on when it comes to the journalism world. And the first one is just the idea of getting it wrong and how that relates to trust in journalists. People already don't trust the media, and anything that takes us further away from people, that takes us further away from communities, that separates us from our audience is a problem. In a lot of ways, I see the future of communications and journalism as more community-based, more on the ground. And I think we risk, if we just jump headlong into using AI for everything, we risk severing that. And it's already tenuous, that link between journalists and their audiences. And if people on the other end of our work just believe that who knows could be who's writing our content. It could be a robot, it could be my neighbor, nobody knows, nobody cares. Well, I think that could lead us down some really troubling pathways for journalism, which is already, and people who care about information integrity generally, this stuff is already in peril, and it could get even worse. So not to end myself on a down note, but that's certainly something I worry about when it comes to this. Maybe I'll just quickly mention my egregious mistakes too, because I forgot to mention this. Some of you may be familiar with what happened at Sports Illustrated earlier this year. Not only did they publish generative AI stories that were incorrect and had problems with them, but it turned out upon further examination that the writers were fake. They had fake headshots and fake bios and had written fake articles for the magazine. Sports Illustrated apologized. I believe they said it was some sort of third party that had done this on their behalf. But if you want to wreck a good brand or a good communication, or a brand that took a century to build, if you want to wreck it quickly, that's a great way to do it.
Okay, to Alex, and you might want to, there was a comment in the chat asking if you can elaborate on how to use AI for evaluation as an example. Not sure if you can marry those two things together, but we could hold off on that latter question until afterwards. I just thought, well, it's your turn. I'll pepper you with that question.
Sure, yeah, no problem. I think that the greatest potential benefit of AI for professional communications, PR and marketing comms in particular, is scale. So we've always had a scale problem in agencies and at work, in organizational shops as well. And this finally allows us to scale our efforts because it removes some of well, it will potentially allows us to replace some of the low attention tasks, and focus on higher level image making, branding, and whatnot, storytelling, story making, etc. So I think that's the number one potential benefit. It's also the ethical limit, because I think the biggest questions that we face, that organizations face, whether it's government or publicly traded corporations or universities or hospitals, is alignment and explainability, right? So is your AI aligned on your organization's values and on its mission, vision, and values and its strategic objectives? And can you explain how the AI did what it did when the public asks you a question about why it spoke to them in an inappropriate way, or why it didn't give them the answer that they were expecting? So, I think that's, for me, being able to, who's the first line of defense on those kinds of questioning? It's communicators. So you should know your organization, right? And be able to explain its provenance and that sort of trail as to how it did what it did, like what data was trained on, what was the training protocol, et cetera, right? So those are the two, and I'll reserve my answer to that because that's a bit of a longer answer about the evaluation for the question period. Yeah.
Rebecca, take us home for the lightning round of questions, and then we'll go to there's many questions appearing in the chat, so we're going to have a good discussion here.
I think foundationally what Archie and Alex were both talking about is that the currency of public trust and that trust relationship capital is going to be more valuable than ever. And as professional communicators, we need to be curators of that trust. It's this paradox of the digital AI era. So yes, we have this scale, our ability to communicate and connect with people is just going to grow and grow and grow. But simultaneously, we're being exposed to these risks, to these relationships, these new vulnerabilities. It's going to be even more difficult to build trust, kind of like with Sports Illustrated, or people being skeptical and wondering, did a human write this? Did an AI write this? Who am I talking to? Is it a real person or a robot? And so it's going to be even more important in the realm of communications, those two critical factors of protecting reputation and strengthening relationships. Those are going to be more important than ever. That is a huge risk. Benefit-wise, just real quick, invest in using good AI. If all you've ever used is the free version of ChatGPT, you have no idea what you're missing. Like, it will fundamentally change how you see the world for $20 a month. Just try it out for 1 month. But just as a quick story about how it might limit you, just using something like ChatGPT 3 as a research tool, it's not connected to the internet, has knowledge cutoffs, but even using the free version, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's not going to return you accurate results. Most importantly, that major news outlets don't allow ChatGPT to scrape information from their websites, like 80% of major news outlets. So when you're asking it for news, it's giving you news from really unreliable sources. So just invest in using it as a thought partner, use multiple different types of AI. And if you haven't tried really good AI yet, just, what is it? Probably 2 coffees at this point. Save yourself 2 coffees next month, invest in like ChatGPT 4 for 1 month and experiment, because then you're going to get the full benefit. So that is a really big benefit and opportunity.
Okay. Well, for me to just recap a few things, and before we shift to opening questions from the chat, for one, I'm hopeful that AI tools will help us discover and create new solutions that are really needed this century, when used well by meaningful and well-meaning communities of practitioners in the ways that the panelists have described. Being aware that of the government policy is a required skill for sure in my books, but I also want to be clear about the limits. Like, from my perspective, I don't think it's going to happen in my life that we're going to have any matrix type of AI which pulls its own plug, starts to be embodied in robots, and eventually creates its own culture, language, and social norms. I think that's far off, well beyond our lifetime, but it's important when we think about government policies that the safeguards should still be in place now, when we already know AI is ending human lives as unintended or intended consequences. So our basic community of practice, it might not be part of your sector that you need to think through those regulations or policies. But if we continue this kind of conversation, I believe it will take us in the correct direction of its use and help us really be aware of how to safeguard its practice going forward as a pattern recognition and recombination tool in many ways. So, having said that, as a kind of recap, I'd like the first question I have is to Alex, if you want to elaborate on how to use AI for evaluation. One example is included in the slides, which is Keith .ai. It's a personal AI assessment assistant. That might be one, but I'll turn it over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's just hard to do is find time and money to evaluate, because campaigns or just operations, right? When you're in communications or marketing comms. And what I've found is that AI can speed that process up by, I found in my own practice, maybe 30–40%, right? Because text analysis that I can do to keep tabs on how the clients I work with are being talked about, as well, doing media analysis, as I said earlier, and there's so many other ways. So it can also help in automating your evaluations. So right now, you can use Excel to a certain extent, or Google Sheets to automate your practice. But what AI can do is it can speed up, it can help you write scripts, it can help you write very basic code, I'm talking very basic code, to gather information automatically and pop it into a Google Sheet, for example, right? And that's labor saved, right? I mean, that's what would have been otherwise hours and hours of click, click, paste, right? So that's one way that you can certainly use it right now, and that you can like turn it on, use it right in that way. Yeah.
I have another question for the panel. Do you have any thoughts about how to support students who may be concerned that AI is taking away entry-level roles that they are looking at as they graduate? I know that's a fear that's happening right now. That's what Maya Smith has asked. Anyone want to take on that question?
I noticed Rebecca answered it in the chat. I'm not sure if she wants to jump in. I have some thoughts too, but do you want to go ahead, Rebecca?
I really don't have a good solution. I think just everyone needs to be investing in their Gen AI skills. And if you're coming with those skills, you are more appealing to potential employers who are still trying to figure this out. So if you're coming with a great skill set, foundational, traditional marketing, comms skill set, with also some AI literacy and confidence, I think that will be highly valued.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is just quickly I think in my experience, there's not a lot of AI knowledge at the highest levels of, certainly in journalism, and possibly it's the same in the communications world too. I think that there's just a lot of like, people don't know what it is, or more to the point, they don't know quite how it's going to work in their field. And so I think if you're a young graduate and you have an understanding of this, and understanding of how to use it in your field, I actually think that puts you ahead of a lot of people in your field. And then secondly, somebody has to tell the robots what to do. And if it can increase your capacity, if you know how to use it and you can do double the work that your colleague can because you know how to use AI tools in this way, that also puts you ahead of the game. So I think that's a good place to start, I think.
I would just add that school is a good place to learn structured thinking towards things and systems thinking towards things, because that's what we teach in school, right? So learning structured approaches to workflow, to the technical approaches to AI, to power user level of use, those are invaluable skills those are going to be the new level skills that people look for, because they don't have that expertise in the organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and building off of those responses, I would also add that when you look at the market that you're going into, what area, like journalism has its own struggles right now, but unemployment is low, and we talk about with our communication students that there's more jobs for our student work placements than I've seen in quite some time. So it might impact certain areas, but having the extra gen AI skills will help you separate yourself when you're going in for an interview or applying for jobs. It just depends on the industry. Be aware of it. Be confident in your skills. So I'm looking at the time. I think we have time for at least one more question. Donald Colvin asks, I'm curious to hear how you consider privacy with AI tools. Short of running a model yourself or choosing a corporate product, most AI tools, particularly on free plans, are collecting tons of behavioral and personal information automatically and without ability to opt out. For example, researching a niche or sensitive issue using AI can elevate that topic to the surface for other users. How can you build this into the thought process for students and help them manage their privacy while still taking advantage of these tools? Would anyone like to?
I can take, yeah, I mean, this is top of mind for me. Just talking about it yesterday with somebody who does corporate comms at a big publicly traded corporation. I just don't put anything embargoed into non-firewalled chatbot. And if it's firewalled, make sure that you know which parts of the corporation or organization have access to what you're doing, right? So if you're working with the senior leadership team, developing executive communications and, dealing with stuff that could, impact HR, make sure that somebody inputs a question into the, intranet that's driven by Copilot or whatever. They aren't going to get what you just inputted. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think from teaching social media as well, you can opt out in student assignments if a student really wants to protect their identity. There's other ways they can do things, either by using a pseudonym or a different account, not their home email account, or reproducing things in basically like the planning of things, by giving them an alternative assignment where they don't have to use their own materials if they don't want to be feeding, whether it's a social media AI or a different kind of AI with their own behavioral information. You can log in and use a different account that could be a fake account, or providing students with that. 1 minute here. Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Well, I think we actually hit all the questions in the chat. I hope it was informative, folks, and we hope that on behalf of our panel here, that we all continue this discussion in your own organizations. Everyone will have a recording of this. For the folks that showed up, there was almost over 100, and I believe there's over 300 that are registered. So we really appreciate you showing up and asking us questions and being a part of the discussion. I'll turn things back to our gracious host, Chasten Remillard. Please take us home.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, fantastic discussion. I built up a whole chat GPT screen of notes, and I'm going to have it produce me a summary. But thanks to Peter, to Alex, Rebecca, and Archie for coming out, and thanks for all of you for joining us. If you're interested in this kind of conversation, this is a pre-conference event. There is a conference tomorrow and Thursday, which Ariana just dropped a link into, that you can register and join. It's free and it's online. You can just come when you wish. And there is also some sessions coming up in March 5th and 7th for those who might be thinking about doing a BA or an MA in professional communications at Royal Roads. So I'm just going to give you that information. And thanks again to the panelists, and great topic. Maybe we'll come back to this in 7 months. Is that the turnaround, Rebecca? We need to do this every 7 months, and we can come back and have another conversation. So thanks again. Stay safe, everyone, and look for the emails with the recording and so on.